Bengals fans, something was said this week that immediately caught the attention of people around the NFL. And if you follow Cincinnati closely, you're probably already wondering whether those comments crossed a line. A veteran wide receiver made it clear that he believes no team's second receiver is better than him. And naturally, that statement puts one of the Bengals' biggest stars directly into the conversation. But once you compare everything that was discussed, the debate becomes much more interesting than a simple confidence statement. Before we get started, make sure you like this video and subscribe to the channel. If you don't want to miss the biggest Bengals stories and exclusive discussions surrounding this team, you're definitely going to want to stay with us throughout the season. Now, let's get to what really matters. Stefon Diggs recently made it clear that he still sees himself as one of the very best receivers in football. His message was straightforward. He said he can compete with anybody and challenged people to name a team's number 2 wide receiver who is better than he is. He even brought salary into the conversation, questioning whether those players deserve what they make compared to what he believes he can still offer. That kind of confidence isn't surprising from a veteran trying to find his next opportunity. Free agency often becomes a competition not only on the field, but also through public perception. Players want teams to believe they still have elite value, and Diggs certainly isn't hiding how highly he thinks of himself. But once that statement reaches Cincinnati, the conversation changes. Because if we're talking about the Bengals, we're talking about T. Higgins. The comparison immediately becomes difficult for Diggs, because Higgins has continued to prove why he is considered one of the best complementary receivers in football. Looking at last season, Diggs put together a solid comeback campaign, recording more than 1,000 receiving yards, after bouncing back from what many considered a disappointing period previously. That deserves recognition. He showed he could still produce and become an important offensive weapon again. However, when comparing him directly with T. Higgins, the numbers tell a different story. Despite seeing fewer opportunities and even missing 2 games because of injury, Higgins still finished with more receiving yards and significantly more touchdowns. That level of efficiency speaks for itself. For Cincinnati, Higgins isn't simply another talented receiver lining up opposite Ja'Marr Chase, he's the perfect fit. That's really where this discussion starts separating itself. The Bengals don't just have 2 great receivers. They have 2 receivers whose skill sets complement each other in a way that allows the offense to function at an extremely high level. Ja'Marr Chase brings one set of elite abilities, T. Higgins brings another. Together, they create one of the most dangerous combinations in football. That's why the argument isn't simply asking whether Diggs is talented. Of course he is. The real question becomes whether he would actually improve what Cincinnati already has. Based on everything discussed, the answer doesn't appear to be yes. Diggs deserves respect for rebuilding his value and producing again. Nobody can erase the resume he's built throughout his career. But projecting forward is different than looking backward. There are questions about whether those production numbers will continue over the next several seasons. Meanwhile, Higgins continues showing exactly why he remains such an important piece of the Bengals' offense. The conversation also extends beyond statistics. Chemistry matters. Fit matters. The role each player accepts matters. And that's where things become even more interesting. While discussing Diggs, attention was also brought to some of the off-the-field situations surrounding him. Although one legal matter resulted in him being found not guilty, there are still additional legal issues surrounding him, creating another layer that teams have to evaluate during free agency. For any franchise considering a veteran addition, talent is only part of the equation. Availability, consistency, locker room fit, public perception. Everything becomes part of the evaluation process. That's why simply saying you're better than everybody else's number 2 receiver doesn't automatically convince organizations. In fact, some may view those comments as creating unnecessary friction before even joining a team. Looking specifically at Cincinnati, there really isn't any current indication connecting the Bengals to Stefon Diggs. Still, the discussion naturally leads fans to wonder what his role would even look like if he somehow joined the roster. He certainly wouldn't replace Jamar Chase. He certainly wouldn't replace T. Higgins. That leaves the possibility of serving as another receiving option deeper in the rotation. From a pure talent standpoint, many would argue Diggs would represent an upgrade over other depth receivers currently on the roster. Andre Yoshivas entered that discussion. While Yoshivas continues developing, there are still questions about whether Cincinnati could improve that third receiver role, particularly when it comes to consistency and limiting drops. On paper, adding a player with Diggs's experience sounds attractive, but football isn't played on paper. Would Diggs truly embrace becoming a third receiver? Would he comfortably accept fewer targets? Would his personality blend naturally into an offense already centered around Chase and Higgins? Those questions don't have simple answers. Sometimes the better football decision isn't necessarily choosing the more recognizable name. Sometimes it's choosing the player who best fits everyone around him. That philosophy became one of the biggest themes throughout the discussion. While debating the current receiver room, attention also shifted toward rookie Kobe Young. The Bengals selected Young despite already having considerable talent at wide receiver, which naturally raises curiosity. Teams usually don't spend draft capital at positions where they feel completely satisfied. That makes Young someone worth watching. Even more encouraging were the comments made by T. Higgins himself. Higgins explained that he sees similarities between Young and his own rookie season. He described Young as quiet, naturally talented, possessing strong hands and running quality routes, while also pointing out areas where refinement can make an enormous difference. Rather than simply praising him, Higgins spoke about helping him improve. He mentioned details involving route running, lowering the hips more efficiently, and becoming cleaner in and out of breaks. Those aren't generic compliments. Those are specific examples of a veteran actively helping a younger player develop. For Bengals fans, that's exactly the kind of leadership you hope to see from one of your established stars. Instead of worrying about protecting his own role, Higgins appears willing to invest in the future development of another receiver. That's another reason why Cincinnati values him so highly. As the conversation continued, another veteran receiver entered the discussion: DeAndre Hopkins. The comparison between Hopkins and Diggs wasn't really about statistics. Instead, it focused on approach. According to the discussion, Hopkins expressed a willingness to do whatever a team asked of him. Play inside, play outside, play the slot, adapt, contribute however necessary. That message sends a very different signal than publicly challenging every team's receiver hierarchy. Confidence matters, but flexibility matters too. For experienced veterans entering free agency later in their careers, showing teams that you're willing to embrace different responsibilities can sometimes become just as valuable as reminding everyone about your past accomplishments. That's why Hopkins's approach was viewed as a stronger example of how a veteran can market himself. Rather than emphasizing who he believes he's better than, the focus becomes what he can contribute. Could Hopkins still help a team? Many believe he can. Would Cincinnati ultimately pursue that possibility? There are still plenty of other roster priorities being discussed. Linebacker, offensive line, cornerback. Those remain major talking points among fans. Even so, Hopkins continues surfacing in conversations because of the fit he could potentially provide if circumstances ever aligned. As for Diggs, the biggest takeaway isn't that he lacks talent. Far from it. The real takeaway is that confidence alone doesn't automatically win this debate. When comparing him directly against T. Higgins, the Bengals have every reason to feel comfortable with what they already possess. Higgins continues producing. He continues fitting perfectly alongside Jamar Chase. He continues mentoring younger players. And he continues proving why Cincinnati values him so highly. That combination of production, chemistry, and leadership is extremely difficult to replace. So while Diggs's comments certainly generated headlines, they may have unintentionally reminded Bengals fans just how fortunate this organization is to have one of the league's strongest receiving duos already in place. Now, the discussion belongs to you. Do you believe T. Higgins is clearly the better number 2 receiver? Or do you think Stefon Diggs still deserves consideration in that conversation? And if Cincinnati ever had the opportunity to add another veteran receiver, would you rather see someone with Diggs's confidence or someone who approaches the role more like DeAndre Hopkins? Leave your thoughts in the comments below, because this is one debate that Bengals fans are definitely going to have strong opinions about. Who dey?